Welcome and bienvenidos to our new program called Next Generation, highlighting the many creative journeys of next generation leaders. In this series, I will bring you the stories of young leaders in science, literature, medicine, education, and business. Those who have chosen to reach further, travel farther, innovate, and take the risks often necessary to make a difference in their own lives, in those of their families, their communities, and someday in the world. My name is Julieta Garcia. For over 22 years, I had the great privilege of serving as president of the University of Texas at Brownsville. Through that work, I came to know the stories of many of our students that overcame great obstacles to attend college and through great sacrifice of their own and of their families, make it through. Getting to know their stories was always a great inspiration to me. So I thought I'd chase some of them down, interview them, and let you hear in their own words what they're up to now, what their challenges were, and what they hope to accomplish in the future. I promise you will be as inspired, amazed, and humbled by their accomplishments as I have been. Now let's get started. We are very, very pleased to have today the privilege of interviewing Ivan Valdez, Dr. Ivan Valdez, here in our studio in Brownsville. Ivan, welcome back home to your campus and to Brownsville.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garcia. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So you might remember that my first interview when we started Next Generation was with Ivan Valdez, and he was just finishing up, I think, is when I interviewed you at Harvard. Ivan started his education here in Brownsville, worked in labs here on campus, and then had the privilege to study for his doctorate at Harvard. And so we caught up with him as he was, I think, finishing his graduation and right before he had launched into his next adventure. So, Ivan, tell us what you've been doing for the last year and how that relates to how you began your career here in Brownsville.
Sure. Dr. Garcia, like you said, I came to UTB to do my bachelor's in biology. I graduated in 3 years and then took off immediately after that to do my PhD in biomedical research at Harvard. And my research at Harvard was focused on diabetes. So I graduated in 2016, actually. So I've been out of graduate school for the past 2.5 years now. And I had been working in life sciences strategy consulting in Boston for the past 2.5 years. And what I was doing was helping pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies that need some sort of scientific, some help with scientific or business problems. Let's say the pharmaceutical company does not know where to invest their resources, for a new drug or a new medical device. So they come to us, and then we provide assistance, and told them the best way to invest their money. And for me personally, the past 2.5 years have been great. I've learned so much. The nature of consulting is that you're constantly working for different companies, working on different projects. So every 4 to 6 weeks, it was a new topic, and I had to continue reading the literature, trying to become an expert in a very short amount of time about all these different topics to be able to help these companies out. So it was a great experience.
That's amazing. So you have spent the last 2.5 years still in Boston in the frigid cold of the Northeast and learning from a whole new vantage point what people do with biomedical degrees. So you were kind of the interpreter, as I understand it, right, of the science and then looking at investment opportunities for those companies.
Right. So since my background was in biology at UTB and then my PhD was in biomedical sciences, and that was advising companies on the science but also business portion, I also needed to take some courses to learn about the business side. So while I was working and consulting, I took some courses at the Harvard Business School. Then I read a lot of books about the topic, and then just working in the field, you get exposed to, people that have MBAs and you work along them. And I was able to learn a lot about business as well to be able to help these companies.
Now, when you started out your time there at Harvard, was this your intention to work for a company of this kind?
So close, maybe 2 years before I graduated, I realized that I had a really strong interest in the world of pharma and the business side of science. I remember the last 2 years before I graduated, I took some independent coursework just to learn a little bit more. I became interested in the stock market and how these pharmaceutical companies grow. I started investing myself a little bit. And then when I was looking into job opportunities right when I was about to graduate, I learned that consulting was a field that kind of merged the two sides. It merged the science and the business. And my company, what they do is they hire people who have science background, because at the end of the day, we are helping pharmaceutical companies. So they want people with PhDs or some masters in science with a strong interest in business. And I think that worked out really well. And the name of the company is Fletcher Spate in Boston. And it was great for the past 2.5 years.
Okay, so then you find yourself in this brand new environment, whole new network on the business side and also in terms of science. And that's must be very rewarding to be able to help guide that frontier of new item product development, for example, or research development.
That is right. So a lot of the things that I used to do were very rewarding because many times, as part of the job, I needed to be interviewing physicians and scientists, not only in the U.S. A lot of these companies are outside of the U.S. Many of these projects were in Spain, for example. And since I was, I am bilingual, and I was the only person that could speak Spanish in my company, I was in charge of leading these projects outside of the U.S. Actually, I just did one recently where we had to interview physicians in Mexico. So it was about dialysis, a little bit related to diabetes. But it was rewarding because many of these people that I interviewed were experts in their topic, in their field, and I felt very excited to be talking to these very important people, very knowledgeable in their field, and on top of that, I was getting paid for that. So I was learning a lot along the way and then getting paid for it.
So that's, again, it's so hard to know when you start out in a field where you're going to end up and to even understand that there are industries of the kind that you now are consulting with, industries that connect science with the business world and science with physicians and researchers. So you were doing that work and enjoying it, and still lingering in Boston and thinking about coming back to Texas someday. So tell us your newest bit of news and where you are in the process of building yet a new network.
Sure, actually. So I would say this started about a year and a half ago, where I knew that I had graduated with my PhD. I had gotten some experience in pharmaceutical and life sciences consulting, but I knew that I wanted to come back to Texas at some point. I still really was not sure what I was going to do here. Unfortunately, at the moment, there are not a lot of jobs similar to Boston, like consulting. There were not many jobs. So I remember talking to you about a year ago, and I explained to you my situation, and this is my background, and this is what I'm interested in. And then you kind of sparked, an interest in my. You poked a little bit of curiosity.
So you're going to blame me now, Ivan?
Not blame. I feel very happy that I talked to you because you kind of encouraged me. You asked me a simple question: can you do a postdoc? And at the time, I had not even considered doing a postdoc. And a postdoc is typically that's what happens after you graduate with your PhD. You naturally continue in academia doing research, but without taking any courses, without being distracted by writing a thesis, for example. You are very focused on your research. But instead, I decided to work in consulting. And you asked the question, can you do a postdoc, for example? And I read this article recently that San Antonio was growing a lot. And I said, you know what, I'm going to give that a try. I'll explore the opportunities in San Antonio. And that's exactly what happened. In February of last year, I sent an email out to a professor. His name is Dr. Ralph DiFranzo. He is chief of diabetes at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio. I explained to him in my cover letter that I had not touched a pipette, I had not worked in the laboratory for the last 2 years, but that I was very interested in his research. And I explained to him my research and how my research would contribute to what he was doing in his lab. And I heard back from him within a week or so. He said he would love the opportunity to talk to me and for me to explain a little bit more about my background and my interests and discuss the science.
Were you surprised when you got a personal response from him so quickly?
I was very surprised, actually, because I tried that out, not really expecting people to take me seriously since I had been away from the bench for the last 2 years.
And when you say from the bench, tell our audience what that means in scientific circles.
So the bench is when you're working in a laboratory, it's typically known as the bench because we are doing all the experiments right there in the bench. So it's called basic research. You're working in a laboratory, and I had been away from that for the past few years. But he answered my email. We talked on the phone. And we applied to a fellowship together last April, I believe, from the American Diabetes Association. I submitted some ideas about research, some letters of reference, and it took until December of this past year to hear back from them.
Well, now that's not that long a period of time, Ivan. That's a pretty short turnaround.
I was very nervous about it. He said even if you do not get the award, we would still cover for you to come here. But of course, it's always nice to have your own source of funding.
Absolutely.
But I heard back from the ADA, the American Diabetes Association, with positive news this past December.
So tell us about the positive news. Exactly. So they're offering you a postdoctoral fellowship to work with Dr.
Ralph
DeFonso. And why him? And why would they choose this twosome now to work together on something?
So the fellowship from the American Diabetes Association is a fellowship that covers 3 years of research. And it also gives a little bit of money every year so that I can go to conferences and present my work. And the reason why I decided to apply to his lab in the first place, when I heard back from him, he said that he gets maybe 3 to 5 applications per week of people that want to do a postdoc in his laboratory. But what caught his attention from my application is that he felt that my cover letter and my application were very personalized. That there was genuine interest in working in his lab. And certainly there was, from my end, a genuine interest to work with him, not only because he works in diabetes, which is my background, and also because he's in Texas, but also because he has a really strong reputation for mentoring other people who then go on to become professors and becoming independent in the field. And he's also very well known in the area of diabetes.
So now you connected up with a new doctor, and he's not a PhD; he's an MD, and that often happens in scientific research. Isn't that the case where you combine those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he is not a PhD; he is an MD. So he has a lot of experience working directly with patients. And it's something that I don't have experience with. So as part of the fellowship that I got from the ADA, a small component of that will be to do a little bit of translational research to work with human patients.
So now translational, the term itself, when we think about it in the kind of generic or vernacular, we think of translating from one language to another. But what does translational mean in science?
Sure. So like I was saying a little earlier, my experience is working in the bench, meaning working in the bench of a laboratory, only working with cells, for example, or rodents. Translational research just means taking those findings that you learn in a laboratory in the bench directly to how they're going to be applied to the human population. So something I'm very excited about because I don't have experience with that, but I'm looking forward to that.
Well, it's about time, Ivan, that you got to us. I'm so glad that now you'll be able to take all of this knowledge and expertise and experience and begin to apply it in a very real sense. I'm sure that's been the case before with all the work that you were doing as a consultant, because those experiments and those products that you were supporting, of course, have impact on people. But now you're going to be doing it in your area of interest, diabetes, a topic we know is so important to people in the Valley, for example.
That is absolutely right. And that's another reason why there's several reasons why I decided to make the transition back to academia. You always hear it's very common for people who are doing a PhD or who are working in academia to go to industry. But it's very rare when people that are working in industry or, working in a business corporate setting decide to go back to academia. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons is that I know how much diabetes affects people here in the Valley, and I have a background in that, so I felt I could contribute a lot more to the region and to Texas in that way. And
I think that's going to be very important because the whole notion of the diabetes and how prevalent it is in the Mexican-American population in particular is growing in interest and growing in concern because the population is growing itself. And so people with those characteristics that apparently attract the disease of diabetes and somehow, I'm sure I'm not saying it perfectly right, but somehow that problem is getting larger. It's not maintaining its current importance. It's getting more important for us.
Right. So genetics have something to do with it.
Yeah.
But I think that lifestyle has a lot to do with that as well, and education as well. And I feel that sometimes scientists do a really good job at discovering new things, but sometimes that gets lost when you're trying to communicate those findings to the general population.
So now you're in the process of moving from Boston down to San Antonio. Okay, so someday we're going to get you back here in the Valley. I am very hopeful that that's the case. But there's nothing wrong with stopping off at a wonderful medical school and health science center like UT Health Science Center San Antonio, one of the most progressive ones in the UT system, and the home to our former chancellor, Dr. Francisco Cigarroa, who is back to his own kind of bench. He's in surgery again, doing pediatric transplant surgery. And so for some reason, the angels have attracted you back to San Antonio and have brought you under now a new mentorship of Dr. Ildefonso and also Dr. Cigarroa, and then all the rest of us, your mother included, that are closer to you.
Yeah.
So thank you for making that wonderful decision. So when do you start your new position?
I actually start next week, next Wednesday, the 13th of February.
That's so exciting. Well, I know San Antonio is a wonderful place to live and to enjoy the arts, and I know you love music, and we're in the band as you were growing up. So you're going to get an opportunity to really drink it in because hay de todo ahí. So you're going to get back to eating good Mexican food again and enjoying a very vibrant community. So if you started out thinking that you were going to be in diabetes, you finished the doctorate, went off to industry, and now, as you say, in a rare kind of move, gone back to do postdoctoral studies. So, of course, you don't want to hear this, but now you're going to be thinking about, well, what happens in 3 years, right?
That's
the moment you get situated in one thing, you think, now what? What does it launch you to do next? What would your options be, at least?
Sure. So at the end of the 3 years, it really depends, right? Because people can do postdocs for as long as they want. I know people that have been doing a postdoc for 10 years, for example. But I don't want to be in that kind of position. My plan, if everything goes well, is at the end of 3 years would be to apply to another fellowship, but this would be to gain a little bit more independence. There are fellowships that are given by the government for people that are doing a postdoctoral fellowship before they open up their own labs to kind of gain independence, kind of have their own projects. They're still working in the laboratory at the university setting with somebody like I would be with Dr. Ildefonso, for example, but I would be doing my own project to hopefully the next step become independent and open up my own lab. And that is the goal. That is the plan. And if that doesn't work out, because I know it's very challenging, it's very difficult, only a small percentage of people are lucky enough to conduct their own research independently. I could, always go back to industry and continue contributing that way.
So you're going to have many options. Yeah, obviously, there's not going to be ever a lack of opportunity for you in such an important area of concern. So now you're going to be able to be closer to your family. You'll be, 4 hours, an easy drive on a Friday afternoon to come home and see mom and dad and your sisters and friends. Are you pleased? Are you going to miss Boston? What will you miss?
Well, I'll certainly miss Boston. I spent 9 years in Boston, but I'm extremely
was it that long?
excited.
9
Since
years?
2010.
Oh my goodness! Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I am very excited to be back in Texas.
Well, I think I know Texas is going to be very, very happy to have you back here and connecting with all of our next generation researchers and students. So I hope that along your way you consider our own medical school as a place for you to teach and build that new generation of scientists and help build the medical school because, along with research, the medical school is training docs and they need people just like you. Do you see yourself ever at a university?
Absolutely. I think it would be a great idea. I mean, all of this is so new and very exciting for me. When I left in 2010, there was not a medical school, for example, and now this region is growing so much, especially in the sciences. So hopefully one day that would be the plan.
And one of the things that happens, in medical schools is when a medical school is established and a research center is established, like we have our own diabetes research center here at UTRGV, is that they also attract commercialization opportunities. Do you see yourself? Have you thought about commercialization?
I have, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it all depends on how lucky you are with your research. I know some colleagues over there in Harvard who have discovered a few things as part of the research, and they patent that, and then they hire consultants to help them launch their own businesses. I mean, of course, that would be something for me to consider, but it depends on how everything goes with the basic research.
Absolutely. And you could kind of be your own consultant, right?
Yeah, a little bit of experience with that as well.
Yeah, so you've done that as well. I think that's one of the hardest things about studying in one area is that you don't know how to interpret it, how to use it sometimes for the benefit of your own opportunities. Sometimes you're thinking only about how it affects others. You're going to be able to do both. You're going to be able to help the world, help everyone with diabetes, and then also help yourself and maybe attract others to this important work. That's what I would hope to. Now, when you're in your new position at the Health Science Center in San Antonio, will you have students in your lab? Is that part of how you'll structure your work?
There are a few students. There are some graduate students, some technicians that work in the lab. And as part of my postdoctoral fellowship, training them is also part of what I would have to do. So now I got to step it up and do that as well.
That's wonderful. So you'll be launching that next generation of Ivan Valdez students who come kind of bright-eyed and not knowing where they're going and help guide them through the process.
Right. And since education is something that I'm also very interested in, I plan to take some courses or get a little bit involved with that as well because, like I mentioned, it's not only the science that I'm interested in, it's also the communication aspect of science. So hopefully I can get some experience with that as well and then bring it back at some point to
we have a School of Public Health at UT. Well, actually, it's here. It's a satellite of the UT Health Science Center's Houston. Their public medicine, no, it's called the School of Public Health program, and that is exactly what they do, right? They try to figure out how to get to the masses with good advice that was a result of someone on the bench figuring out what it is that they should be doing. But translating the bench research to the application to the very people in your family and in the communities around us is really the most important work that I can imagine doing. So all that you're aiming towards seems like the exact kind of altruistic goal that we all set for ourselves. So felicidades. I'm so proud of you. So
Muchas
happy
gracias,
to hear
doctora.
the stage. So we have just a few more minutes together. And so now I'd like to kind of zero in on personally. What have you, if you were to, we are being heard by students who are currently at UT-RGV and other people in the Valley that are studying at the community colleges or at TSTC. And they're thinking, is this something I could do? Were you especially wired to do this work? Was it someone that mentored you? Was it your parents? What launched you on this path and kept you on?
Sure. Yeah. You know what? I've never forgotten how much support I have received along my journey. And I'm always, whenever I come down, I always try to visit as many teachers as I can, as many mentors as I can, because I know that without their support, I would have, never been able to do anything. And along the way, I did have terrific mentors. I could go every single year of my academic journey. I can name somebody who has been a strong supporter. When I got to UTB, I was under the leadership of Dr. Colomb, who was also the vice president of research at the university at the time. Great influence, and he encouraged me to continue in academia and continue in research. But also, what I would recommend for students to do is not only be surrounded by people that would mentor them, but also try to seek out, networking opportunities. When I was at UTB, I was also part of a program called MBRS RISE program that, gave me the opportunity to travel to conferences and meet people at different universities, like Harvard, for example. And at the time, it did feel very intimidating. I said, me coming from the Valley, how would it be possible for me to ever go to Harvard, for example? I remember going to a conference where there were like 10 booths. Harvard was in a conference with 10 booths. It was very intimidating to get near them. But it's all about going and, having the courage to go and talking to them and presenting yourself. And then you never know what's going to happen. So I really advocate and encourage people to do that and find their own connections and their own network.
I remember the story. About a lady from
Dr.
Cornell.
Sheila Thomas.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, too, from Cornell was Dr. Randy Silver. She
There
was
you
my
go.
mentor at
Yes.
Cornell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm going to recruit you, but so is everybody else. So if you get a better deal, take
Yeah.
it. And you did. You got a better deal.
At one of
And-
these conferences, she
Yeah.
personally, when I told her that I was interested in applying to Harvard as well, not only Cornell, she was at Cornell, but also Harvard, she said, okay, let's go to the Harvard booth. And she told Dr. Sheila Thomas, who was also a great mentor for me at Harvard, she said, this is Ivan. He is my student. I just want to let you know that if you guys don't take him at Harvard, he already has a
That was
position
great.
at Cornell. And Dr. Sheila Thomas was impressed, and then she was the one who eventually gave me a call a few months later to tell me that I was accepted to Harvard.
Well, we thank Dr. Colomb for his wonderful work, the impact of his life and his research and his mentorship on this campus is still felt, and you're a good example of that. And thank all the other mentors that you have had along the way and will continue to have. And now you'll be able to do some of that mentoring yourself for the
Right.
next generation. So felicidades. Thank you so much for coming back home, giving us a call. Stay connected, because I'll stay connected with
Absolutely.
you, and we want to hear about your continued good success.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Dr. Garcia.
Muchísimas gracias, Ivan. I wish you the very, very best in your work.
Thank you so much.
Bueno, hasta pronto.
Thank you for tuning in to Next Generation, a program highlighting the next generation of leaders in the Rio Grande Valley and beyond.